Okay, so this has been the Other Person Problem series, and today is part four, the Alive Edges. So, just as a quick overview, part one was looking at this irresistible future and what is a structure that we can start to visualize a map of how we can all work together towards a common vision without having to pick just one and fight about what that version is. And the idea of facets, that each of us can be bringing a facet of a disco ball. In the second call, we looked at desire as a way of prompting life and of bringing in something new into the world and some of the tangles that happen with that and how the four forces can help sort that. And then last call, we looked at the foundations of reality, really diving in to the four forces and how they really align how they act as a way to access states of consciousness, to develop skills, and also align with each other and align with life. And today's call, we're going to be right at that alive edges in that middle, the idea of the facets. How can we support each other in bringing our facets to the world? How can we, what's that next level new paradigm community look like? And what is the process like? What are the skills and the processes? How does this apply to actually navigating in new territory? So, I'm going to I'm going to be actually offering a bit of an invitation about what's next and give some of the philosophy behind the invitation. I'm going to actually start with that. And, um, and then, like I said, we're going to look at what does it look like to apply these skills and also what I've been learning from working with, I said with thoughts of people, that's a funny typo, with thousands of people and over 50 communities and consulting and doing research. And what I think is needed for a foundation for a new kind of community, and then open it up to discussion. That's a very interesting typo. So, one of the things here, lots of words here, just kind of notes for myself. But I've really been struggling with how to offer this traditional marketing. Just, I don't know about a lot of you that are in business or entrepreneurs, or there's a lot about traditional marketing that's hard. And also how to price this work. And, I want to kind of say right up front that there's a lot of very familiar with the idea of launches for videos, and then there's an offer, and there's all these tricks to like create urgency and scarcity. And the truth is that these things also work because of human nature. And I've been really struggling with wanting to invite you into something next, something that's got a more formal structure to it, and also at the same time wanting it to really invite people that feel resonant, that say yes from desire, not from fear or pressure or sales techniques. So I've decided to offer and structure this what's next in phases, and I'm going to talk about more of this in a little bit later. But the idea of, as founders, this is a beta phase where I've got a new website. It's a starting point, and I would love to have people involved in helping to flesh that out and to see what wants to happen there and to really get some momentum and critical mass going in order to really anchor in the field to invite more people in and have it grow. So I'm offering this. I just want to kind of put it right out there that this first offer is going to be insanely low for a professional level training at $97. So, and there's some bonuses and, the usual stuff. But I'm going to talk about that more later. But I wanted to kind of frame it without the sort of bracing and also put behind it a little bit of the philosophy behind what I'm setting up and what I'm wanting to do as a starting place. That feels really important for me to really emphasize because I know that this is going to take on a life of its own, and I'm looking forward to that. But this other person problem has been a series of an overview map. And so over the next month, before the official start in the first week of November, I'm going to be offering other free experimental workshops that are more focused on an embodied practice of it. Allie and I next Tuesday are doing a non-ordinary sense-making call together. And I want to really focus on context and some skill building so that there's a more of a sense of how this can be applied. And also, I've made the decision that all of the core content moving forward is for the next 3 months anyway, it's going to be an experiment where the core training content that I'm going to be offering over the next weeks is going to be free. And I've been really sitting with it because a lot of the content and the way that I view things and the way that people's experience, what I've learned from working with people and the case studies are so contrary to sort of what's already out there. So saying to somebody, "Oh, come learn about connection," people are like, "I already know that." But the skills of connection are a little different than what people might know. So, and also, it's just there's a lot going on in the world, and I'm like, how can I have as much positive impact as quickly as possible? I know resources are really limited for a lot of people, so I'm like, what can I just give away and have it be helpful? And also AI, there's so much content. It's just going to get more and more. People are uploading my book to AI. That my clients are telling me they're putting their calls with me and transcript, onto ChatGPT. And so it's really not about the content. It's about how do we apply this in real life in context so that we can process faster, easier, with more pleasure and more stickiness where it lands and we get the change that stays and sticks. And my intention is to build and develop a skilled community and the infrastructure that supports bringing your facet and your desires into the world. So having set up that frame, I now want to look at what does it mean to be at the alive edges? And a little bit of another little training piece here. And looking at the four forces, I found that there's also another fractal or another layer where each of the four forces are also an edge. And at that edge, having all four forces at once at each edge actually breaks open a whole process. So for example, whereas connection that we've seen in the past trainings, connection was all about consciousness and about being able to experience and the skills of experiencing. The non-ordinary, the non-physical, all of the four forces actually help you navigate that non-physical, non-ordinary edge. And when you put them together, then it enhances your ability to get intuition, to get those subtle senses. It's all related how you interpret it. Purpose skills help with that. So each of these sort of act as they have a flavor of one of the forces, but I found their ongoing processes. And at the center, I want to really have you think a bit about it as this new state of consciousness is being able to be at the center of these edges in this multidimensional now. So I'm going to go through each of these edges, and you can kind of see in this image the idea of the transforming edge of sort of how are you updating the past, the emerging edge of what's being created in unknown territory that we don't now know, but that we're calling in, that non-ordinary, non-physical edge, and the idea of the actualizing edge of what are we actually experiencing in physical reality. So I'm going to go into each of these. And in addition to these being like processes, these are edges that we're constant, that we're always in process with. I've also found that I've been really thinking of these edges also as edgy spaces. And I want to take a minute here to talk about the idea of safe spaces and brave spaces and why I feel we need edgy spaces. So when I say edgy, I'm not talking about outrageous, pushing it just for the sake of, creating chaos or creating, an edge. But what I found is we're all on edge. And how do we actually be in edgy spaces that move us from being on edge to actually moving and composting and transforming at these edges? So, what I found is with safe and brave spaces, there's a lot of desire there to have sameness and coherence. So, but embedded in them, I want to kind of bring up two places where they get, where they're not as helpful. One is that there's an embedded power dynamic. It's like the other person, if it's a safe space, there's sort of this intent, there's a unspoken kind of intention that means that, nobody's going to trigger anybody, or the other person is responsible for how I feel, or it's got to be risky to share myself in brave spaces. There's still this idea of risk. And I really want to, instead, in edgy spaces, the idea of that sharing is your choice. And sometimes it's not appropriate to share something in the context that you're in, but putting the power back into each of our hands to say, I want to show up in a space and be willing to be uncomfortable because it's what I want. And what's on the other side is what is valuable, and being willing to stay in that. And also giving the other person the freedom to have their reaction, to have their response, and trusting that by working together, we can actually harvest and get something really valuable and be in new territory, so we're not constantly looping in that desire tangle loop, for example. And the other difference too here is in edgy spaces, I want to really focus on how do we help each other have more capacity for difference, for tension, um, and be able to fully feel ourselves, be in that expression growth aspect at the same time that we're in coherence and connection and purpose together. And that requires some practice and some rewiring. I also feel like we need edgy spaces. We need it to rewire our nervous systems and give our nervous systems new evidence. So there's our nervous system and our beliefs and our emotional reactions are based on past experiences. And so if you have, you can learn something new intellectually all day long. And then when it comes to actually doing the thing with another person, our nervous system's like, oh my God, we're going to die. So we need to actually give it new evidence by actually being in the situation, being in the places that scare us, but also then giving it new evidence. And to be able to experiment and practice without getting canceled or consequences. I feel like there's so much walking on eggshells these days in communities and dinner tables. And it's like, how can we actually experiment and explore these things without having to worry about getting kicked out or being misunderstood? And the idea of both personal and collective trauma, like we need these spaces to be able to go into these hard topics and these hard social problems and really revision it and untangle it so that we can be in new territory together and learn the skills to actually navigate in that new territory. And edgy spaces are great. It's a bridge between current patterns and something new, and an opportunity to go beyond comfort zones, but not just to stretch comfort zones, but in service of more aliveness, more closeness. Like, what if getting triggered actually means that you get to be closer to the person that you're triggered with? It's a completely different frame of being able to hold and be willing to be in these um, uncomfortable places. So let's dive into each of the edges a bit more. Um, The non-ordinary edge is about the non-physical, about consciousness, about experiencing. And in this, the skills of the non-ordinary edge are all about cultivating our subtle senses, being able to learn and communicate with non-physical realms, whether it's with medicines or without medicines, being able to develop states agility where we can understand where we are, what state we're in, and how to shift it, and being able to really expand our experiences for more states of consciousness, more experiences, and more parts of ourselves, to be able to be really in that multidimensional, faceted self where we get to expand and explore multidimensional parts of ourselves. And right now, with between all the UAP possibilities and AI, it's like also about learning to communicate with different kinds of consciousness, different kinds of intelligence. And the idea of these edgy spaces, when we go into these expanded states, we can often bring up unexpected memories and reactions. We can have challenges getting in and out of those states. So it's why it's really important that we want to be able to have a container to learn how it feels to be in a new state. It's amazing when my experience with people both working in all the retreats I've done over the years and in my own personal life, there's a lot of reactions that can happen even when it's something physical, something positive and pleasurable. The body can have these circuit breakers. So states of consciousness, we think, oh yeah, it'll be great, but we have to also be aware that it can bring up stuff, and it can kind of short circuit us. So being able to have the skills to be able to navigate that. And we need to be able to check our work with each other in those spaces, like to be able to say, hey, I'm getting this intuitively, or I'm tuning in, but what do you get? And be willing to actually figure it out, because the interpretation in the non-physical language of the non-ordinary is where it really is an art to learn the how to translate. Then we have the transforming edge. The idea that here is it's the butterfly, the caterpillar turning into the butterfly, but then the butterfly going, oh, what do I do with my memories as a caterpillar? I've referenced this a couple times in the other trainings. Michael Levin's work showing how a caterpillar can learn a skill and still remember it as a butterfly, but a hard body 3D flying butterfly is very different than a soft body caterpillar. So how are we updating ourselves? How are we taking our experiences from the past and composting and harvesting from them? How are we taking triggers and conflict and saying, ooh, something's really important here. Let's work with that. And so these edgy spaces, whether it's in personal or relational process work or doing world work where we're looking at bigger issues, transformational workshops. I know I'm imagining a lot of you watching this have your own, you are also a facilitator or a transformational leader. And so, being able to navigate psychedelic sessions or helping others with those, there is a particular container that these transformational spaces are different than the non-ordinary spaces, for example. And let's look at the actualizing edge. This would correspond, whereas the non-ordinary edge would be sort of connection flavored. The transforming edge would be expression flavored, because we're kind of updating our perspective, our sense of self. And here, the actualizing edge is where we go into relationship, and this is about context, about what is it like to be in the physical reality, the consensus reality with each other. So different contexts bring up different parts of ourselves. Like we learn different genres of music, or learning to play different genres. Playing blues versus country is going to have a different set of skills and a different context. And learning how to really be embodied. What is it like to feel it and get that feedback of the actual receiving it? We often can be in desire or personal growth in a way that's not about like, hey, what's actually happening right now? And being able to track, oh, this feels different. And also being able to enjoy the physical experiences of life and develop our physical senses. Some of the edgy spaces would be, things like eros infused spaces, relationships and sexuality spaces, conflict spaces, business and collaboration spaces. Really actualizing edgy spaces are any context, but where there's like, how do we then apply these four edges to that space? But these are some of the ones that I notice need a little bit more focus, and these are going to relate to what I'm calling the communities of practice also. And finally, the emerging edge, the idea of being comfortable with the unknown. And here's where we want to have improvisational skills, creativity skills. We want to be able to work with circuit breakers from an intensity point of view when things get really intense, and expand our intensity, our capacity for life force. And the ability to sense and follow what wants to happen. What is life calling to us, as well as our own visioning, our own prophecy, our own ability to cultivate desire as an act of creation. So that's at the emerging edge. And again, just naming that this is a starting place. And I think of this as the approach that we've been talking about, all the Alive Edges approach, this core training is one aspect of it. I see the platform as the place where we get to engage and learn together and accelerate each other's process. And then I've put in here also the experiences, because a big part of my journey has been in-person events. And I know for a lot of you too, there's just nothing quite the same as being in person. And how can we use the platform and the approach and all three of these to actually enhance each other, so that when we have experiences in the real world, we can stay in touch, we can integrate and get the best of all of it. So a couple of other aspects now, moving into this, the idea of the platform and a community. A couple of the other things that I've found in working with people that is a shift from a traditional course or a traditional training community is that the 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 nature of these edges, these alive edges, is that there's a lot of nonlinear learning. It isn't a do this first, second, third, fourth steps. Everything is sort of connected to everything else. The four forces all inform each other. And I really got fixed over the last several years over how do we do nonlinear learning as a community, as groups, and how can you do that in a way that still allows for tracking content and making progress and being able to say, okay, I did this or I didn't do that. And so over the last several years, was a bigger deal than I realized, and has taken quite a while. But I've set up the training community with this idea of Lego block content. So the idea being here that if you miss a call or you drop in, you I would be, when you're going to a call, the Lego blocks will be the content that you need for that particular call. And you can also see if it's been completed or not, because several of these concepts, like the foundation skills, will show up in all these different contexts and in different ways. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to show how this one piece of skill or content is applicable across all these different places? So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but the current sort of beta platform has this idea of completable Lego blocks. And the idea that in the future, also being able to use AI and set up customizable learning paths that you could put in your own learning blocks. There's so much. This vision for this website has been here, the platform I've had for many, many years. And I know a lot of you also have visions for this. So I'm excited to see what can happen with it. But to acknowledge that being at these alive edges requires a different container and a different way of learning. And speaking of that, also is the idea of customized communities of practice. So you can learn the skills of consciousness agility, but as we're applying it to different communities, different contexts, then you're going to learn different skills and different ways of your body registering things. The embodiment piece, it makes a difference. Like I can learn something in my personal relationship, but then learning it in my work setting is different. And so we want these different communities of practice. What this also does is helps me help you and help us help each other really focus on what is the outcomes that you're looking for? What is the current experiment that you're running and what area is that in, so we can get more specific. And there's lots of possibilities. I just kind of screenshot some of the ways we could connect with the idea of social calls. And I'm really, for example, in the non-ordinary realm, being able to have daily experiments that just go into your inbox and like, how can we accelerate? What kind of forms, what kind of forums, what kind of activities can we do? So this is the part where it gets really creative. And I'm hoping down the road that as people are joining in, we can come up with all sorts of interesting ways to customize these particular communities of practice. So having said that, what are the current communities of practice that I feel are a starting place? I've put them into two different categories. One is personal communities of practice, the idea of the core skills. That would be, I'm looking at like a weekly call, 3 calls a month, plus community calls and edges work possibilities. But also, non-ordinary would be that non-ordinary edge and cultivating the subtle senses. Even though that's often part of the core, I felt like it needs its own practice space for people that are really wanting to dive in, like I used to do, and I'm wanting to do it again. Intuition game nights where we play, and being able to experiment in that non-physical, I found, is just really important. The culture space, Alexander Biner and I are going to be doing the non-ordinary sense making once a month, where we're talking about cultural trends and how to make sense of them in a different way. The reason I put psychedelics, I've got several clients and colleagues who are excited about offering this as a collective community of practice, where several people are going to be offering things too. And actually, it's true for some of the other most of the spaces. But the psychedelic one I've included because it's been such an entry point for a lot of my clients and an entry point for a lot of people like yourselves to sort of start to open up to these states. It's how, I supported Allie through that. Allie's going to be included in that. Alexander Biner is also going to be included in that, and some calls and bringing in guest speakers and things like that. And then the Eros community, once a month, I'm going to be doing a specific Eros workshop that will be included in the Alive Edges and will also be available probably in. I have a bunch of meetup groups, Eros meetup groups, so it'll be available through other places as well, but it will be included in the Alive Edges as one of those communities of practice. And then I'm wanting to bookmark the idea of these professional communities. And this is where I'm personally get most excited. But I also recognize that in order to have these different calls and these different communities, we need a critical mass. We need some momentum. So the plan is to open these in the beginning of January. The first two, the Guild and the Leader Lab, are part of a subscription. And it's specifically focused on the Guild's focused on entrepreneurship and bringing your unique work into the world. This was the Non-Ordinary Impact course that Allie and I did. I do a lot of business consulting. Most of my clients are leaders or entrepreneurs or facilitators. And so the Leader Lab is focused on organizational leaders. How do you work within an organizational culture? And then the Edgy Spaces facilitation training is for people that want to actually work as a facilitator in these edgy spaces. And that's where most of the clients that I work with, most of the facilitator training that I do is with more advanced, I certainly cover a lot of beginner things too, as far as the basics of facilitation, but my mastery is really in that, like, how do you work with these more charged and more edgy spaces where these states of consciousness are active? So, and what's next, as far as just a little highlight, I'm going to be sharing more about this over the next month. There'll be some workshops and things to experience it. But the next round of series will be when the official start of the community in the beginning of November. I'm going to be doing a 6-week experiential training that'll be starting November 4th. This is included in the $97 personal beta subscription that I'm offering. And it will focus on each of the forces, and desire and power are the other two calls. So this will be going deeper into each of them as a foundation for to the end of the year. So again, just quickly, as we're wrapping up here, that the idea of the 3 different membership phases from now until November 1st, I'm offering the $97 a month membership for both the personal and the professional communities starting in January. Once you have this price, as long as you maintain your membership, you will maintain that price as a lifetime price. And I'm offering a bonus if you sign up the first 25 people to get a 30-minute one-on-one session with me. My current coaching rates are $6.25 an hour. That's an executive coaching rate that I know a lot for people, but it's not only am I wanting to offer it as a bonus, it benefits me because I really want to get to know people and sort of help with the quick start of how can we start to really get this community going and using these skills together. And I'll be offering some other quick start, like Edges Work calls, which is where I do process and untangling for groups. All of that will be included in that beta membership. And then phase 2 in November 1st, the price is going to go up to $147. So in final thoughts here on this, there is so much possibility here. We need each other to see where it leads, not just in this community, but just in everything that we're all bringing in. I would love to hear what you would like to experience in community, and what are you calling into the world?